Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the netcast that we have here today. We have on the phone Gregg Fairbrothers, and he has written a book, From Idea to Success. I'm holding it up right now so that people can see it. And Gregg is, I'm reading your bio in the back here. So you're a professor at Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business, founding director of the Dartmouth Entrepreneurial Network called DEN, and the founding chair of the Dartmouth Regional Technology Center. And one thing that I find of interest, obviously, is that you have managed and founded oil and exploration companies on 3 continents. And of course, in Calgary, that is, you're okay in my books if you've done that sort of stuff, I guess is the best way to look at it. We definitely love that aspect. So anyways, Gregg, I appreciate you being on the show today. And is there anything you'd like to add about your background or your bio or anything like that?
I don't think so. I mean, thank you very much for having me. I mentioned before when we first connected in this call that Calgary was probably my favorite city of the places that I had done business. I had several companies outside the U.S. as well, and Calgary was always my sentimental favorite. My wife's family is all from just north of you there at Innisfail and go way back in that territory.
That's amazing. So your wife's from Innisfail. She lives out on the East Coast now. How's she love that?
Well, actually, the compromise was I wanted to move to Calgary, and we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and New Hampshire looked like about the best latitudinal compromise we were ever going to reach.
Good for you. Good for you. So, by the way, when I was reading the book, I really enjoyed it. The one thing that I have to take a look at is, it does remind me very much of a textbook kind of philosophy, but it's not, I guess, is the best way to look at it. And the other side of it is, being an entrepreneur, writing a book like this, I'm sure it is kind of geared around some of the stuff that you teach over at your school and everything like that. Was that the kind of the concept of why you started to write the book?
Well, actually, I'll give you the short version, but there's an interesting story about why I wrote that book. I really never had an intention to write a book. I'm not even sure I had an intention to be a professor. My dad was a professor, so that was kind of the last thing I wanted to do. But an agent, picked up a news story on a course that we teach here at Tuck, and called me telling me I should write a book. And I really didn't want to write a book, and we went around and 2 or 3 times on that, and I didn't feel I had the time. I didn't feel I was a writer, and wasn't sure I had anything to say. And he convinced me that what we were doing in our course needed to be put in a book. And I did happen to have a student working with me at the time that was a pretty good writer, and I told him, well, okay, what he told me was, look, you're giving people advice all the time. You put that in a book, and you can hand them the book and then get an hour back every time you do that. I thought that makes a lot of sense. So I found this student, and we wrote the book to just basically be the stuff that we're telling people as we try to help them be more entrepreneurial here as they go through Dartmouth and go through our program.
Excellent. It's, and it is very much, it is all encompassing. It's like almost literally, like you say, it's idea to success. It's A to Z as you walk through the book. That's the one thing that I found very interesting about the book. And also the how you break it down into what I would call bite-sized chunks, I guess is the best way to put it. So
the goal was to, first of all, really drive a fundamental philosophical approach that we've had here, which is, I think, what caught this guy Lauren Reese's eye, which is we're focused more on entrepreneurial, on helping people learn to be more entrepreneurial wherever they are, not just start companies. But most of the people who are going to do that on their own, learn that on their own, are going to be people who start companies. And I felt that there was a gap as I looked at the marketplace, thinking whether I would do this or not. There's a lot of stream of consciousness stuff out there. You buy it in airport bookstores, and there are a lot of textbooks, and they have everything in them, and nobody reads them. And what I really felt was missing was a start-to-finish resource that would get people, be more of a gateway to get people into all of this detail that's out there. There are more resources out there than any entrepreneur can ever have time to read, even if they did it full-time. So the goal was to try to create a guide that would get people started, but more importantly, help them understand why they're getting started.
It's also interesting from standpoint, I guess, when someone walks away, and typically, someone who I think would very much benefit from this is someone who's got an idea stuck in their head saying, how do I actually go from the idea, like you have here, to success? And it's how do I walk away and end up making this thing actually work out there? That's one of the the ideas that I got from the book, or one of the concepts that I got from the book, and also the fact that you break it down. And you also give examples, which is amazing as well. So it's a great book, good read, and I'm plugging the heck out of it right now, holding it up and showing people that you should actually go get it, because it is very much a good read on this one. So what are the it is geared towards that entrepreneur. What are some of the most important aspects that any entrepreneur should be concerned about? I mean, there's so many, but really, if you kind of had 2 or 3 that you could take a look at, it might be legal, it might be sales, it might be whatever, daily operational. What would be you think would be kind of maybe the 3 things that are very high level as someone comes out the gate, going and taking an idea to success?
Well, first thing is I think we want to be sure we're talking about where the gate is that we're coming out of.
Sure.
Because I really see there are more or less 2 broad classes of people out there. There's people that have an idea and think, oh, that's a great idea. I'll make a lot of money on that. I could really do something with that. And all their friends encourage them and never really do anything. And not that that's being pejorative. And then there are the ones that they either have jumped or they're ready to jump. They seriously are going to go and pursue their idea. And quite honestly, we broadened our focus to talk to all of those people. So we need to kind of take them in 2 groups. The first is the ones that have the idea and really don't know what to do, and that's most people who have an idea. In fact, when it's been surveyed in the American public, somewhere between 60 and 80% of Americans will say yes to the question, have you ever had an idea and wish you had made a business out of it? And yet, of course, less than 0.5% actually try that in any given year. And when people are asked why not, the most common answer is because I didn't know how. So for that group of people, the first thing I think is to say, not only are you normal, but you're in the majority, and you may never pursue that idea to the point you really build a company, but even if you pursue it for a while, you're going to learn a lot of things that are not only going to be satisfying for you personally because you're more in control of your life, but you've learned to be more entrepreneurial, and that's valuable anywhere. So for those people, I think the main thing is to start right at the beginning of some of the things we talked about, which is to properly understand what's an idea, what's a feasible idea from a non-feasible one, how do you think about that and define that for yourself, and to really appreciate the importance of execution. Ideas really, in essence, are worth nothing. It's only when they're executed they become worth something. And that puts you on the path to, okay, how do I execute, which is, of course, most of what we wrote about. For an entrepreneur, somebody who's actually decided, I'm going to do this already, this becomes much more about a nuts and bolts process. They are now on the road to trying to make this idea a success. And let's face it, they aren't all going to be successful. The parallel goal is if it's not going to be successful, we want to find that out as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So
I would imagine that's a big hurdle for people, right? Is I've seen, because I've been in the entrepreneurial vein for quite a few years too, I see people literally take $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, throw it at something, and they're literally creating a product looking for a problem as opposed to looking at a problem and finding a product that can fit it.
Yeah, and then there's the whole paralysis through analysis issue of once you're there, it's like, okay, let's just make sure this is perfect.
You guys should write a book.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, the biggest problem that I see a lot of times with people coming through our program here is this product in search of a market problem. And you're absolutely right. The other end of the spectrum is, it's exactly right that one of the biggest problems I often encounter with first-time entrepreneurs is they come in with the product in search of a market, and that's a tough road, even if it does kind of work out. I've never seen it work out in spades. The most successful entrepreneurs always start with the need, identify who has that need. That's the customer. Customer's the one who pays you. And then go talk to the customer. And generally what happens is you can kick off a constructive cycle of iteration there where the customer often has some better ideas about the product that's going to help them than you do. And the two of you together come up with something, and now you know where you're going to sell it.
Gotcha. I find it interesting too that do Did we lose you again,
We're
Greg?
good.
You're there? Good, good. The analysis by paralysis. I see that so much where people literally have to wait until it's like 110% of what they think it should be before they head out the door. Any suggestions there for people?
Well, the first thing is I would hate to see that they were at 10% before they headed out the door. If they're building their product before they're talking to the market, they're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But then again, talking to the market can be the same analysis paralysis of ready, aim, and you never fire.
Yeah.
The goal is, there's a great professor at the University of Virginia that coined this term effectual reasoning, which means ready, fire, aim. And in fact, I mentioned that in the book, and just recently got an email from Tuck, student of mine from a few years ago, who died laughing when he read that. He sent me actually an excerpt from the Marine manual on artillery firing, and said basically they have this long section about how you do all your calculations and everything. So the Marines take a shot, see where it lands, back up, take another shot, then shoot in between, and that always works. And that's kind of what you should do in the marketplace.
Excellent. It kind of also brings a point. I've seen this numerous times too, and I'm sure you have as well, where someone sets out to do one thing, and these are the people that create something, not realizing they actually have something completely different. And there's got to be a skill set there to see that need, which is very much in the vein of what you're talking about, right? Is I've gone to the market, identified this, I'm going after it, but it doesn't work. But all of a sudden, I've got people gravitating towards this in a different way, looking at different things, like Twitter. Wasn't that an example where it started out as a news feed,
news syndication
type process, and next thing you know, a whole bunch of people have jumped on it, and they're talking back and forth, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
What do you? Go ahead.
There are hardly any successful deals that you can look at out there that ended up the way they started.
Absolutely.
Almost always there's this, iteration process in this. Like now the new jargon is pivot. Everybody's talking about pivot. Their heart's in the right place. You, as you say, you want to be paying attention to what the environment's telling you, because the environment's smarter than you are.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting, because that actually leads to a question I had. Everyone always talks about most good entrepreneurs fail a few times. And now, of course, that prevents a lot of people from even getting into their own entrepreneurial endeavors, because they're, of course, if everyone's sort of inherently afraid to mess up. But what's your thought regarding that and mitigating the downside of that scenario, or if it's even true?
Well, first of all, it's a truism in business that you learn a hell of a lot more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. Mm-hmm. When you're successful, could be a lot of reasons why you're successful, and you're never sure, including dumb luck. Mm-hmm. But if you make a mistake, if you take a look at it carefully enough, you'll figure out why, and then you've learned something, and you will never forget it. A good entrepreneurial approach is to never be afraid to jump in and do the ready, fire, aim. Be willing to make mistakes, back up. The goal is to make little mistakes, make intelligent mistakes as soon as possible, and never take a risk you're not prepared to lose, meaning you can't risk it all. In the end, lessons learned is probably one of the most powerful teachers.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I'm sure you've gotten that way. I've gotten that way. It's it's like, oops, I made a mistake. As long as you're smart enough to realize that you've made a mistake, right? And don't let ego override that thing at all.
Well, and I guess I light lots of little fires everywhere to try things out, but that's my style. I bring the gas and just pour it all over it. So that's why we work so well together, I think. People, we've kind of talked about products and then trying to get the thing out the door, or services out the door and stuff like that. But say someone has a really good idea. All entrepreneurs really, they can either bootstrap the heck out of something and try to get where they want to get to, and which is fine. Or if they've really got something, they need to go for funding. What's your take on funding if you're an entrepreneur? And I know that's how long's a piece of string, because it could very much depend. It could be an oil company where you got to get millions of dollars to do a drill, or it could be just a simple little software program that a $20,000 angel could actually fund that sort of stuff. Where do people start looking for funding? How do they go after that sort of stuff?
It's a huge question.
Yes.
I mean, the first thing with the whole question of funding is where you started, which is, what do I need? And you balance that against, of course, what's possible. There's certain kinds of deals that just don't raise certain kinds of money, and certain kind of teams will never. A good piece to remember is that you only get 100 points of equity. There's never any more than that.
Yeah.
And money is really expensive. So there are two schools of thought. One is raise as much as you can whenever you can. The old saying, "When take a cookie when cookies are passed." I'm not sure I'm that big a fan of that mindset. I mean, I certainly understand the idea that money is more available at certain times in the cycle than others, but I'm a big believer you should never raise money just to raise money. You should raise money because you know why, and only raise what you feel you need. Because once you've given away that equity, you've given away control of your company, you've given away focus, and you never can get it back. But if you do want to go out for money, the next thing you got to do is you got to decide where are you in the cycle, which kinds of money are most adaptable to where you are. You know, angels will invest in one stage and are no good later. They only invest so earlier than that. You got to look other places. Not every deal is right for venture capital, even though a lot of first-time entrepreneurs' first words out of their mouth are, "I'm going to go raise venture capital money." Venture capitalists invest in about 1 out of 100 deals they look at. Mm-hmm. And remember that those 100 deals are self-selected to be deals that a venture capitalist might actually invest in, which means they invest in very few of the deals that actually get funded every year. Angels, basically almost an order of magnitude and a half more deals per year than the venture capitalists invest in. And then, of course, the number that either of those groups invest in is only a fraction of total business starts in a given year.
Is that more because there's a lot of bad stuff that comes out, or is it more people don't understand how to position their service offering, product, the value prop, anything like that? Or is it's probably a combination of both. I kind of answered my own question, but what's your take on that?
Well, actually, not to be argumentative, but I'm not sure it's the right question, because to say that only a small fraction of the deals get funded makes it sound like the rest should never have been funded, and therefore they're like illegitimate or no good. Most deals are just not right for venture capital.
Gotcha.
And even most deals are not right for angel investing. They're both subsets of private equity. The legitimacy of a business, to me, is only judged by the meeting the needs of the founders that created it. Mm-hmm. If they've created a kind of a business that either that wants to be venture capital grade or that needs to be, then that's where they go. But the fact that they didn't get funded by a venture guy because they never belonged there in the first place does not mean they're not a good entrepreneur.
Gotcha.
So what are the alternatives then for somebody who wants to build something out? What are some other alternative methods?
It depends what the something is. I mean, software people tend to see the world through software or web or biotech. Everybody sees their own business as kind of the center of entrepreneurial universe, and there really isn't a center. Depending on the kind of business, it could be just your own bank book. It could be just your sweat labor. It could be government grants. Canada's got several good programs. The United States has some programs that launch companies. There is, there's always the friends and family route, which is a big one. There are corporate partners that will weigh in and partner with companies to see them up and running, joint ventures, those kinds of things. And then there's just my favorite, which is fund it off your customers. As you know, given that you've had a history in software for a long time, that was the greatest business model of all. You came up with an idea, went to a customer, they bought it from you, then you went and programmed it and saw if it would work.
Yeah, funny you call it software. We used to call it vaporware, right?
Exactly. It was a great business while it lasted.
Yeah,
right?
It was to tell you the truth. We would, not to say lie or anything, but you shake your head and say, yes, I can do that. Yes, we could do that. Yeah. And we actually had some very good successes out of that. But it wraps around to a point you were making where it's like, someone's telling you what they want. There's the need, right? Great. Now I'll just go build to that need.
Have we lost him again?
Greg, are you there?
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay, sorry, we had some dead silence there for a sec. Sorry, it was a good
nice
pause.
Yeah.
Let's
pause for a second and go on to the next question.
Okay, excellent here. So, as we've gone through, we've talked about some of the funding aspects and stuff like that. Now, as your little company starts to grow, and I see this all the time, is how do you bring on the right team members? How do you bring on the right people to look at stuff? And when I say team members, I'm talking all aspects of this thing. One of the things that, especially from my background, I'm very much in sales and marketing, but I see a lot of companies struggling with how do I bring on a sales team, or how do I bring on a sales department and stuff
And how do you
like
promote?
That. Yeah, and how do you promote? Obviously teams are important. What do you suggest that people look for in a team member or what they're trying to do? Is there any kind of science behind this sort of stuff?
If there was any science, I think I would ignore it. Let's start there. This is so much, number one, circumstance dependent, and so much a people thing rather than a science thing or a process thing. First of all, you got to be thinking about what stage we're talking about. If it's founders, that's one thing.
Yes.
And that's a big deal because the corporate culture hasn't been established yet. It doesn't even exist. And then, of course, as you grow, there's a corporate culture. Now you're not really hiring founders anymore. You're hiring employees, and stage matters because the people you can attract and that you want at the earliest stages when you're little and need people who are generalists, very different than the people you're going to look for as you grow and have to become more specialized. So one of the things that I really found interesting as we wrote this book was that the people ended up, as I just tried to tell people what I knew was important at each stage of the evolution of the business, we got to the people area, and I realized it was such a big subject that we ended up writing 3 chapters on that subject. It was the only place in the book we wrote more than 1 chapter on a subject. Mm-hmm. And, in fact, as I was writing it, I was probably breaking a little rule with the publisher. We don't need to tell them that, but I was giving away chapters as advice already, monetizing this thing the agent told me about give it away. And I kept track of where I was giving away chapters. And it turned out I gave away the chapters on people more than everything else in the book combined by a factor of about 3.
Wow.
Number one, because it clearly is so important to a company. It's always all about the people. And number 2, because it's a kind of thing where people just kind of jump in and continue to make the same predictable mistakes around how they pull a team together and then how they hire employees. Mm-hmm. People management is everything in the success of a company. I mean, it can't guarantee you success, but you miss it, it'll guarantee you failure.
Absolutely. By the way, you're giving your chapters away for free stuff. There's a lot of guys that do that, actually. We interview a lot of authors, and they actually give away little bits and pieces and stuff. So, but don't worry, we won't tell McGraw-Hill about that.
It's the give forward, right? It's and that's actually the new business model. Actually, is to give something and build trust that way. Obviously,
yeah. So also as part of that, when you look for the team members, as you grow your company, and I'm kind of building where you start small and you start going bigger and stuff like that. There's a point in time where you're going to have to need directors and board members sitting on your team and stuff like that. Do you have any suggestions for what people should look for in board members or directors that come into their organizations?
Well, first is I think that the earlier a company does that, the better, especially in the common case I see where there's 2 of them. Because they almost invariably, the founders will split it 50-50, and any attorney will tell you that's a formula for disaster. And so getting a board to the table right away kind of breaks up that stasis that's created when you have this 50-50 and everything has to be unanimous. What you look for in board members, you want a diversity. So there's no one thing you look for in all the members. You look for different things in different members. So, you definitely want people who confer credibility. You want people who bring experience, business experience. You want sometimes domain, technical experience. You want access to their network. Sometimes you're raising board members because you're raising money from them. What you do want, though, is you want a small board that works well together. You get a diversity of opinion, but once a decision's made, everybody stands by the decision 100%.
Well, now, when you said try to get a board as quick as possible, especially in a situation where there's more than one person, what would your take be as quick as possible? Because I know if I just started something and asked board members to jump on, might be a little too early. But just a rough estimate on something like that.
Well, that's back to this thing of it. I don't see the board as like this monolithic entity. It grows one member at a time.
Okay.
Generally, what will happen is you'll have 2 founders form a company, for example, and bring in a 3rd person as a board member. Usually it's a personal relationship, but somebody who brings some stature and experience to the board. And then you grow it gradually over time. There's this kind of this quality curve you climb. When you're a startup, unless you're a repeat successful entrepreneur, you're not the most beautiful girl at the dance at time 0. And it's going to take a while to get the best guys to want to dance with you. So it pays to be a little bit patient, but you also want to be sure that you've got some access to good board talent at the beginning. So we generally see a board will start at 3. You kind of build it to 4 or 5. Usually by that time, investments coming in. I'm a big believer in get a good solid board in place before you bring investors in, so there's some backbone to the company. Otherwise, the investors are the backbone.
Yep.
And beyond that, you don't want a big board till you're a really big company, because then it's just unwieldy.
Now, the other side to it, too, is it's funny, actually, you just mentioned it. I'm bringing up the idea of kind of structure around a company. And the reason it's really prompting me right now, and this is, you'll appreciate this from your background in oil and gas, is I'm working with a guy right now who is looking to raise capital. They haven't put their share structures in place or anything like that, and they're trying to put a board together. So the other side to it is what kind of structure should people start looking at when they're starting a company? And once again, that's going to be how long is a piece of string, and dependent on where you are in the world. There's certain corporate structures down in the U.S. as compared to Canada, but they're all kind of there is some similarities across boundaries and stuff like that. Any idea as to what might work better for some organizations as opposed to others?
Well, there's factors that will determine which might be better in one circumstance versus another. So there's no one right answer. In the U.S., where I can just speak with actual labels, if you're bringing in serious investor money, particularly institutional money like venture capital, almost invariably you want to see a Delaware C corporation, because they don't want a flow-through entity. In other words, that you get the double layers of taxation at the corporate level, and then again. And mainly because they're very well structured and you don't have all of this tax reporting to do. But if you're going to sell a company pretty soon, or if you want to flow tax benefits, tax losses to somebody, then maybe you do want a flow-through entity. Here in the United States, those are limited liability corporations or subchapter S corporations. You do want, in any cases, you want a corporation, and you want a good set of governance. Corporation governance is pretty well statutorily established. I mean, you have flexibility to write some things into bylaws, but they're structured, and there's a lot of case law. These LLCs, limited liability corps, are basically partnership structures with the protection of a corporation. There's a lot more flexibility there, but that can get expensive because you're kind of creating everything de novo when you're building the organization. All your operating agreements and all your bylaws are essentially whatever you want them to be. So it just depends.
Now, would a good rule of thumb be, consult with a lawyer, or is there? The way I look at it is, you could be kind of a sole proprietor, and you could get yourself into a lot of trouble if you sell something that could create a problem, harm, so on and so forth, and personally be liable. But I guess there's kind of that fine balance as to what you do on that sort of stuff. Correct?
Well, there's a fine balance as to what you end up doing, but there should be no balance on not putting limited liability between you and disaster.
Yeah.
So whether it's a limited liability corp, which works very well for individuals, or whether it's a corporation, you never want to be exposed to liability. As you say, I don't care what it is. You always want to have something between you and liability. As to what it is and when you do it, as soon as you're getting ready to do business and there's a team, you probably want the legal structure.
Yep.
And I don't let anyone who goes through my shop here and takes advice from us or gets involved with us, no one is allowed to incorporate on their own. I won't deal with them if they will. I just decide, I feel like they're too reckless. All lawyers should always be at least consulted.
I have been in numerous situations where the books of the companies reflect directors that aren't even alive anymore and stuff like that. It's I've seen some crazy stuff, as I'm sure you have too. So.
Well, that raises another thing, which is that the right way to do business is never leave skeletons in the closet. Keep your corporate book in order. Do things right the first time, because when it comes time to either do a sale or an investment transaction, everybody's going to go through your books, and if your things are a mess, it's only going to cause you a great deal of pain then, and it's hard to clean it up. So
good rule of thumb is spend your money wisely at the beginning, or getting yourself a proper corporation set up, and make sure the books are in order on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And it shouldn't cost that much. When you say spend the money, it shouldn't cost a lot of money.
Yes, actually, in fact, I have numerous corporations, and I very couple $100 a year just to keep the books in order and stuff like that sometimes, and some of them and everything like that. The other thing too, now, so we've talked about creating a product, bringing on team members, getting funding, everything like that. You know what? And I kind of brought it up earlier where things change, where, you know, your product or service may not be particularly suited for the market. You got to change. But, you know, correcting the course, even when you get bigger, how, you know, what is it that companies should look at, or how can they actually correct the course? What kind of advice would you have for somebody who needs to go clearly down a different path and they realize that?
Well, yeah, the fact is that issue of course correction can arise at any point, from the minute after you have the idea to well after you're established in the market and you're an incumbent and thoroughly entrenched. It's basically a subset of a good entrepreneur is always opportunistic and always paying attention to the environment. And especially in this day and age when product life cycles are getting so short, you need to be thinking ahead every day. You know, is this the best use of my time? Is this the best use of the corporate assets and the corporate time? Time's a huge asset. And if not, you know, where can I spend it better? And everything I ran always had opportunities competing for the incremental dollar an hour, so that we always were having to ask ourselves, is there something better than what we're doing now?
Interesting.
So a checkup on a regular basis.
The health check.
Yeah, like daily.
Yeah, interesting. One of the other things is that, you know, we especially Kirsten and I see this quite a bit right now. We are working with a firm up here who helps out companies with succession planning and or liquidity or management buyout and stuff like that. You know, there's certain trigger events, or there's certain things. One of the bigger things that I see right now is succession planning. So, you know, I'll give you an example. We've come across where a company in Calgary is a drain company. The owner is, you know, late 60s, early 70s, and the son does not want to take it over because he's going into an oil and gas company. You know, there's succession planning. How quickly should someone start looking at that sort of stuff to put into play?
Well, you know, we started this book at the place that I think everybody should start, which is some good introspection on why am I doing this and what does success look like when I'm done.
Yep.
And in every aspect of what we talked about, it was, even if you're not thinking about it now because you're just at the idea stage, you need to think about it now, because what you do now will affect your options down the road. And I don't think there's any place where this is more true than this end of business life question, which is succession planning. If you get to the stage where your business is mature and you know you need to do succession planning and you start, it's too late. Mm-hmm. I mean, you may be able to recover, but it's too late. A good business is built as a going concern where it meets the goals that the founder had when the founder started, and it stays on goal. One of the things I think you're here, and I get a little passionate about this one because I see so many people miss this one. You know, let me put it to you this way: there's a road that leaves Hanover going due west, and it ends up across the river in Vermont, about a mile and a half away, in another town. And every time I ask somebody in that other town, Norwich, which way is that street going, they'll always say it's still going due west, but in fact it's going due north. And the fact is, because of the way that road goes, it makes this very gradual turn. And you can't ever really see you're going around a turn. There's an overpass and stuff. And so you basically have turned 90 degrees and don't even know it. And that happens to businesses every day. Because the founder is not sitting there saying, what is my azimuth heading? Am I still on track to be where I want to be? And anybody who gets to retirement age and suddenly says, who's going to run this business, just was not thinking about that for years. They should have been thinking about that every day.
Yeah. We recently heard one about a story. It was incredible. It was from our buddy, I believe Randy Lennon told us this, and about a company that was doing about $170 million a year in revenue, and the guy couldn't get any of his kids to take it over, so he shut it down. He shut the company down. Which, I mean,
it's just insane, isn't it? I mean, if he'd been thinking about that with that kind of run rate and profitability, people would have loved to have bought that business from him.
It would have been so sellable.
And he could have prepared for that. Yeah. You know, prepared his people, brought somebody in. He could have done an ESOP. There are all kinds of things he could have done.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what hurts me most when I hear about stuff like that is you know they have employees, and he's shutting it down, right? Where do they go? And
exactly.
And it's really, that is tough to take, especially if you've got something, you've obviously put process in place, and you're very, I'm assuming you're successful if you're doing that sort of revenue. You know, even if you want to just do a buyout by your employees or something like that, that's, I mean, that to me that's an option. Reward those people, right? So.
Yeah.
Are there any risks to that individual, that business owner, if he goes the route of doing an employee buyout? I mean, are there pitfalls there?
There's risks in everything. I know there are people who specialize in working proprietors through ESOP and preparing them properly. There's definitely a both the soft side, which is the people have to figure out where they're going and agree on everything, and they need to know how they're going to work together during that transition phase. And then there's the hard side, which is the structuring and the tax benefits, which are substantial. It's like anything else. You need to be thinking ahead. You know what your goal is. And you do it right. You look for where the risks are, and you mitigate them.
Yeah. I have a buddy out of Edmonton, actually, one of my very good friends, who he's started up several businesses, but every time you know what he looks at first is, what's my exit strategy? Every single time he looks at, what is it? How am I going to exit, and what am I going to do? Yep. And he marches towards that so quickly, right? It's amazing. He does a great job too. That's why he's a multi-millionaire probably. So all that good stuff. Hey, so part of, you know, some of the stuff, this is kind of, that walks a lot through the book and what you've you know, what you try to accomplish. I'm holding the book up again. Once again, awesome book. I would highly recommend people go out and get it. But a couple, you know, I'd like to ask you a couple of personal questions, and business related, not personal. I'm not going to get into deep personal questions here. But, you know, what can you name? You know, first of all, one of your biggest frustrations you've had in being an entrepreneur, and one of your biggest accomplishments in being an entrepreneur.
I got to think about that one.
Sorry, I put you on the spot on that one, I guess. I don't know, but...
No, I just want to think about it because I want to give you an answer that's meaningful to people. You know, I think frustration generally goes around intention of people. I've gotten onto this thing a lot the more I've been teaching, is I see people can approach business as a wealth transfer mechanism or a wealth creation mechanism. And they can approach each other as wealth creation or wealth transfer. And I just have increasingly less patience with people who look at a circumstance or another person as an opportunity for some exploitation and transfer of value. Life's too short for that. There's this whole buzzword around social entrepreneurship today. I just did a class session on this to try to figure out what it means because I didn't know. And I think we all have concluded as a classroom that it really just means that you're using execution excellence, which supposedly is in entrepreneurship, to accomplish socially valuable things. And I get very frustrated with people who don't share an ethic of we're trying to create value. I'm not sure I know. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Kirsten and I call that "don't be a scumbag," basically, right? So.
Well, you told me you're being recorded, so I was trying to be...
No. You know what? Hey, we're not under the guides and rules of actual television here or anything like that, so we can actually say anything we want. But no, it's scumbaggery, right? I've seen so much of that stuff that goes on, and it is. I absolutely 100% agree with you. This exploitation of people is not good.
Yeah, it's it comes back to bite you.
It's a whole culture thing, and to some extent, you gotta go with your judgment on people. You know, which ones to just kind of leave alone. It's just not going to work out. But I find that when you can get a team that's pointed in the right direction, I particularly get this in my med tech companies, medical technology companies. We always sit down early and we talk about what we're doing in terms of what's the value it will create, and if it has something to do with the clinic, I'll march us over to the clinic, and I'll get a couple of my doc friends, and I'll tell them, I want this team to see live combat tonight. And we'll sit there, and we'll watch what we're working with, you know, if it's, say, cancer or whatever, or something that's going to be in the ER. And my guys come out of there, they now know why they're doing this. And I'm telling you, you can ride a long time on that.
Interesting. So that's the low point where I guess it's a frustration. Now, what's the euphoria that you've experienced? What's is it when you sell a company, you get a check, and then you have a money fight or something like that? That's tongue in cheek, by the way. Tongue in cheek, totally.
No. It depends on how you want to define as an entrepreneur. Certainly, the biggest euphoria for me in what I'm doing now is when somebody gets it. You know, an entrepreneur comes in here, a kid comes in here, or even a faculty member, and they actually, something clicks and you see them understand, okay, now I see how this is done. And then they can go out and do it and do it and do it. I like to make entrepreneurs, not start companies here. As far as that kind of euphoria moment in business, for me, the early stage people, the real euphoria moment, you've ever seen this Charlie Brown cartoon? Well, I think it was Linus is standing there and he's looking up. And then the next frame, somebody comes in and they're looking at Linus. And then it's like Lucy or somebody's looking up. And then the last frame, all the Peanuts gang is there with Linus and they're all looking up. That's kind of the entrepreneurial experience. You know, when everybody gets it and they're all looking up and pointing the same direction, then the team can do almost anything.
You have the momentum of the crowd, essentially.
Exactly.
It's a shared vision. Once they get on sync with each other and they know why they're doing it, and they know they can do it together, then you know it's going to succeed.
That's amazing. One last question for you is, what is the most important piece of advice you could give to an entrepreneur? That's a tough one, I know. Loaded. You know what? I think. Well, actually, I'll tell you.
Really.
Mine is.
Mine. He's going to hit it. This is one in class that it comes up often enough. Guys, people generally, especially first timers, they always will look at their entrepreneur like it's a baby. And we all love babies. Babies were programmed biologically to protect our babies, to nurture them and grow them, protect them from the vicissitudes of life. And someday our baby will grow up and be robust and can take what life throws at them. But today, we can't let anything hurt our baby. And entrepreneurs will treat their deals like babies, but deals are not babies. And the goal with an idea from the moment you have it is to take your baby by the ankles and bang its head on the desk and try to kill it. And if you can't, a risk in that baby just went away, and that deal just went away. You line the risks up one after another and hopefully trigger the cheap ones to kill first. And every time you can't kill your baby became more valuable because their early ideas are just a bundle of risk. And once you start to think about it that way, you're no longer trying to persuade people with this stupid product nobody cares about because it's your baby. You're listening to the market, and the market's telling you, no, we don't want that. Thomas Edison's first invention was an electric vote recorder that he thought Congress would really want. He took it down to Congress, and the first committee chairman, he looked at it, said, if there's one thing we don't ever want down here, it's that. And Edison said, that's the last time I'm ever going to invent something that I don't know a need exists for.
Now was that the voting machine that was used in Florida a few years back, by the way?
It probably was the same one.
Version of it.
Guess, right?
Well, it's interesting.
And he still didn't need it.
It's interesting that you say that because I had an experience a number of years ago when I was trying to introduce a very unfavored package into the brewing industry in the United States. We were trying to launch. I saw an opportunity to improve packaging, so I approached a bunch of clients of mine with the idea of taking their premium product and putting it into an aluminum beverage can. And everyone told me to go away. And we persisted, and we finally got a client. And that turned into a whole business model, and it's changing things in the brewing industry. And that's an example of that exact thing. Everyone's got. If you have a really, really good idea, and you believe in it, and the people around you are supporting you, don't let that audience tell you you're wrong. Go for it and try to introduce that idea and get some samples going. But on the other hand, we didn't do any market studies and we didn't analyze what the clients wanted there. So it's kind of contradictory what I said at the beginning of this interview.
But that's the fun part of being a 22-year-old without a university education, I think, at the time,
true.
right? So
just wing it.
Most entrepreneurs will tell you they succeeded because they didn't know enough to know what they did was impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's the fire in the belly, right? A lot of people who are entrepreneurs, there is a breed, right? There's an entrepreneur, and then there's people that will never become an entrepreneur. Yeah. But the one thing I've found is the guys that I see that are successful, they've got that fire in the belly, right? They really know what they want to do and how they want to do it and go about it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I've also seen the reluctant entrepreneur, right? Who goes into it, and then the next thing he's kind of the timid, meek person who all of a sudden has created this amazing company. There's tons of these guys in Alberta. You'd appreciate this, Greg, because you've been up here. But I mean, there's a lot of guys in the energy services sector who started with a truck, and next thing you know, they've got like 80 trucks, and they're doing a vacuum haul business and stuff that you would have never guessed being entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah, and one question, and Chris had his final question. I do have another question. It's regarding that individual who's working in that company, who not necessarily comes up with an idea, not necessarily related to the product he's already involved in, some idea, but he's sitting there in this comfort zone where he's currently he's making a decent income, and but he's bored and he really doesn't know what to do, but he thinks this idea can turn into something. What's your word of advice for that person who's in that sort of stale job, thinking, hey, maybe I can make a run of this?
Go spend a lot of time in front of the mirror. The biggest thing out there with this whole issue of people in the job and they have an idea is they don't spend enough time thinking about, why am I really doing this? And it applies to both of those things, right? What happens is people take their job as the given and don't ever question, why am I doing that? They may complain about it and they may be bored, but they don't question, so where is this taking me in life? What do I want? But they will apply that to the idea, but they won't really think it through in terms of, is this a means to an end for me, and the end is some kind of a life goal that's important to me, or is it an end in itself? And I think if you get that resolved, that's when that passion starts to bubble up that you talked about. Investors will tell you nothing else drives their investment decision like the passion of the founder. And that's got to come from the inside, because the person has a line of sight to something that really is important to them. And guys, when I have people in here, and in these chairs that are sitting here in my office, more people have said, this feels like therapy, and it is. It's because we're trying to get at that root thing. What is it that will set this thing off and get it started? And it usually comes down to some variant of the expression, I just want my life to be significant. And everybody's got to define that for themselves, but if you work backwards from that, everything else will start to fall into place. But if you start to get the other things falling into place, but you haven't figured that out, you're just going to keep wandering around looking for that thing.
It's a good word of advice. Hey,
Absolutely.
Has anyone asked any questions or anything?
I think we're good. I think all the questions have been answered. I've been just rattling them off here as we go. So we're good. We're good. Thank you very much. That was very informative.
Greg, I am going to hold your book up one more time, From Idea to Success, from Gregg Fairbrothers. I'm holding it up right now. Once again, it's an amazing book. Highly recommend it. It literally is A to Z and walks you through a process and answers a lot of the questions as an entrepreneur. And I thoroughly enjoyable read on this one. It's about an inch thicker than I normally read, but but it is an amazing book, and I did read from cover to cover on this one, so it's a great book. And Greg, we greatly appreciate your time, and
you can pick that book up at it's Amazon.ca for Canadians, Amazon.com for the United States,
Indigo in Canada,
Indigo as well.
Barnes and Noble. I would imagine you're all over the place, right?
Yeah,
Greg.
I think yes, definitely.
A question for you regarding availability. I know technology versions of this book. Is there an audiobook that's coming out on this at all?
I have not heard any talk about an audiobook. I know that people have been emailing me from around, out in Africa and stuff, buying it on Kindle.
Good. So there's a digital version.
Interesting question. So I do all my books on audiobooks anymore. I should go ask McGraw that question, actually.
Yeah. The interesting thing about audio, no, I'm not going to get into that. I was going to say, people remember 20% of what they hear as opposed to 10% of what they read, right? So it's... and if you put it on video, you actually might do half decent, too.
I think books are a bit different because you have 100% attention in the book, right? Where internet is a little bit different. Thank you very much. Greg, very insightful.
Absolutely phenomenal information. So we are truly appreciative of your time. And thank you very much, and so happy that you actually married a girl from just north of Calgary here. That's exciting for us. That's a shout out to Canadians, I guess.
Yeah, if I only could convince her to move there. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Thank you for the plug on the book. The my co-author Tessa needs every dollar for her med school education. I'm sure she appreciates you.
So we'll mention Tessa. Tessa Winter is the co-author. I'm holding the book up here again. So she needs, please help her fund her medical school.
Absolutely.
There you go.
And just to let you know, in the live chat room, we're getting positive comments coming back. I've had a couple here in the private messages as well. So the audience is very appreciative of your time.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with me today. Enjoy your Canadian winter. I miss him dearly.
I'll trade you anytime.
And thank you, everyone online, for joining us today. Remember to share this event. Click the share buttons in the original invite. You'll get an update as a follow-up to this broadcast. And please share this event with anybody you know who's an entrepreneur that or has entrepreneurial spirit that would like to capitalize on their idea and make a real success of it. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Chris, for joining as well. Thank you, the audience, and have a great day.